For years, he was an informant spilling the secrets of the Chicago mob to the FBI. The story of Red Wemette.
I was told by some people at the time they put out $1 million contract on my head.
Welcome, everybody. Today is November 2nd, 2022. And here we are. And Adam Flowers is joining me.
Hey, Red. Doing great. Doing great. Ready to read some of this book.
Okay. Sounds good.
This is what we're gonna do. So we're gonna start at the beginning of this thing, and we're gonna work our way through it. And if you guys have questions, throw them in the comments. If there's something in the story that you want to expand on. But if you put up a question that he already knows is going to be answered, then we're just going to skip those. Right, Red?
Right.
All right.
If you put up something that that is going to be read to you in the book, then I will answer it later, but we won't do today.
Wow. Kathy Jean. We haven't seen Kathy Jean in a while. There she
No,
is.
there's quite a few people we haven't seen in a while.
Julie M. Leanne Rowland.
Julie M is always she's great.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, so let's start at the dedication. Here we go. Red's going to be watching the comments. I'm going to be reading. So here we go. See how many names I get wrong. Dedication. This book is dedicated to all the victims of organized crime and their families, and to the private citizens and people who have the courage to come forward and help law enforcement on every level to bring criminals to justice. Even if that means that you are not politically correct in reporting potential perpetrators to the proper authorities, especially when our freedoms are at risk. God bless you all. God bless you, one and all, Red. So, nobody cares and what I did about it. This city is what it is because our citizens are what they are. Plato. It's a nice quote.
It's a Plato quote.
Yeah. Where'd you get that quote from? I mean,
Plato?
Well, it's a stupid question.
No, I used to use it all the time. Where'd
you hear it, I guess is what I meant.
Oh, wow. Way back, back in 1966.
Wow.
When I was in the Marine Corps.
Because our citizens are what they are. That's it. That's very interesting. Okay. This is the story of a young man that wanted to make Chicago a safer place for people who had their lives changed for the worse by Chicago's Italian-run outfit. The Italians, you had to mention Italian, racist.
What was Italian-run?
All right. There are many names for the organized criminal underground. Their trademarks of extortion, murder, gambling, and their racketeering their rackets that spread from Chicago to the Pacific Ocean and every city in between. Are their crime families line of business? At the time of these events, it was the largest criminal enterprise in the United States. Unlike the 5 New York families that fought with each other over their turf, the Chicago mob kept control of their ranks and their crews as they expanded operations like true opportunists. These guys were literally getting away with murder, and I felt and do still feel that I could make and did make a difference. In August of 1971, I contacted Special Agent John Osborne of the FBI, not to make a deal, not because I was in trouble, but because I saw the FBI knocking on doors and asking questions about crime bosses that ran operations in the area. No one would talk to them. They knew that if they did speak up, they could be murdered, or at the very least, be out of a job. During that time in my life, I worked as a bartender at one of the many outfit taverns that were common in Chicago. I had the duty of giving an envelope of money once a week to the Chicago police as part of a payoff to make sure they didn't come around if they were called. I was also responsible for serving drinks to people from all walks of life. The outfit looked liked to handle things in their own way, with or without the police. I am William Red Wemette, and this is my story. Pretty good intro, man.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, a precedent is set. I suppose you could say that I got an early introduction to life undercover. When I was 15 years old, I had a job at the Thrift Town department store, a chain that was owned by the Kroger Company in Moline, Illinois. I worked as a sales manager of a sporting goods department because they were short on help. My dad made an agreement with the store manager, Gene Barr, to help get me the position. Dad was the pharmacy manager of the Super X Drugs, which was also owned by Kroger and housed in the same building at the end of the strip mall. Gene treated me extra special, and I never knew why. It kind of confused me. After a few weeks, I noticed in the evening hours, one of the department managers was taking out carpeting through the back delivery doors. He had a few of the stock boys help him take it out. I wonder why it wasn't heading out the front doors like the other merchandise. So I wonder why too, Red.
I was only 15.
Hell, I
All of a sudden, I'm
why.
the manager of a sporting goods department.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Take a drink and wet the whistle here. Yeah. The fact that it also took place at night made it seem odd to me. And I went to Gene about it. Oh, you went to Gene about it. Sure. It went right away.
I go to my boss.
He told me not to worry about it. He told me it was an employee purchase and that they were getting off from work at the time and going home. I could see he thought I was very naive and easy to manipulate, but I knew there was something fishy about his explanation, but I left it at that. I went back to my department and got back to work helping customers, like a good employee of Super X Drugs. All right.
Thrift Town.
Oh, Thrift Town, sorry. The following day, I was approached by another manager from the electronics department. He told me that if I wanted anything from his department, that I would get an employee discount as he winked at me. Later on, I learned that every department manager was stealing from the store, and Gene knew about each one of their thefts. Gene was in on it.
Oh, it's a skim.
We had several strange meetings with all the department managers. Gene was always present, and they would talk about the shrinkage as they accounted for transactions and store inventory. There were a lot of discussions about how to account to the district manager for the shortage of inventory and cash money. Sometimes they asked me about my department and then excused me from the meeting as they continued with other topics. I thought that behavior was odd too, but I just went with the flow and kept busy with my own responsibilities. The stores of that period, didn't accept credit cards, so all transactions were done in cash. I had to account for the sporting goods department, daily earnings, and turn over the cash with the cash register's journal to Gene before I left home for each evening. I learned a lot about how retail sales worked. My figures were always between a few cents to $2 or $3 off between the cash I returned and the register's journal entries. My sporting goods department hasn't been making more money than $100 a day prior to me taking over. I had turned things around, and there were typically between $500 and $700 of inventory each day. But the daily discrepancies bothered me. Gene told me not to worry about it because only an embezzling employee would show an exact match on the balance sheets and cash intake. As long as it wasn't more than a few bucks, everything was fine. Part of my duties included drilling custom finger holes when customers bought a bowling ball. It was an elaborate process to fit their hand to the ball and properly drilled it. I used to use a punch to engrave their names or initials. I got very good at it and never made any mistakes. The back of the store was littered with a number of bowling balls that former employees had messed up, but I simply didn't have the problem. A lot of profit came in from that operation, and I took in at least $100 a day in bowling ball sales alone. Man, a lot of bowling balls being sold.
I sold a lot of them.
Damn, how much was a bowling ball back then?
I think they were $24.95,
Huh.
which was a lot of money then.
Sure. That's yeah. All right. They even took out ads in the local newspaper with a coupon voucher for bowling deals in my department. I had been an avid bowler since I was age 9. I had even been a pin set boy where I used to make 10 cents a rack plus tips if I did a good job or got lucky and worked a tournament. I always wanted my own bowling ball. You were a pin setter? You used to just stand it up before they had the
Yes,
machine?
in Wheeling, I used to set the pins in the back.
I thought they were kidding when they told me about that as a kid.
No, I did. And you better watch out for that ball coming through. You got a ball return you had to send back too.
Oh, really? You'd send the ball back?
Yeah, you pick it up, throw it on the thing, let it go.
Oh my gosh. We sold a lot of different colored swirled balls and basic black ones, but I had my eye on the flashiest ball in the store, which happened to be also the most expensive one. It was a Brunswick Gold Crown. I went to the store manager, Gene, and asked him what it would cost me with my employee discount. He said, "You've been doing such a fine job, son. Just go ahead and take it for yourself. We can account for it with all the misdrilled balls in the back." It was just before Christmas. We were slow that night, so I went right to back and picked out my ball and drilled it for my hand. I also picked up a nice tan and brown striped leather bowling bag, which I paid for and rang up at the register. I put my initials WRW and then filled it with a light yellow gold rouge. It was supposed to dry for 24 hours. I was so pleased with myself and so excited I couldn't wait to get it home. I carefully covered it with a brown wrapping paper and I put it into a new leather bag, making sure the initials were facing up and would dry as they should. I was on cloud 9 as I carried it home. When I came into the door of our home, I took my galoshes. You took off your galoshes?
Yes,
it's over your
what
shoes.
we wore back then.
All right. And I put them into the shoe caddy. I placed my ball and bag next to it by the front door. It was snowy that day, and I had to also remove my shoes. I went to wash my hands before supper. My mother called my father, sister, and I in to eat. We all sat down at the kitchen table. It was customary in my family. We were discussing the day's activities. My father asked me about the bowling ball, and I told him how nice Gene, my boss, was and how he'd given the ball to me for nothing because I was doing such a great job for him and how I only had to buy the bag. He told me, "We'll have to go see Gene about that tomorrow." "All the department managers are getting employees discounts, Dad," I replied rather nonchalantly. When Dad heard that, he dropped his fork. I heard it hit his plate as his mouth went agape.
Yes, a gap.
Quizzical expression that took over his face. Nothing more was said at the kitchen table after the exchange, and I thought he was angry with me. We finished eating. My father went into the living room while the rest of us took care of the dishes. "Come in here, redhead, and explain this to me." I went into the room and asked, "What do you want to know, Dad?" I told him about all the department stores had gotten deals on different merchandise. I thought it was just a reward for all the hard work I'd done bringing in sales in the department. My dad explained that he wasn't mad at me and not to say anything to anybody at the store about anything, to just act normal. And then he got on the phone and called information for Kroger Cincinnati's headquarters, security office. My mom mentioned something about the cost of long distance phone calls. "Don't worry, honey. This call is going to pay for itself." He stayed on the phone and he asked me different questions and he talked things over with a man from Kroger Security. I heard his side of the conversation as he told them how Gene had been borrowing money from the drugstore during their audits in amounts of $80,000 to $90,000 range and then returned the cash to the pharmacy. Kroger Security decided to set up a sting operation and told my dad how they would proceed. He was not to loan Gene money the next time during the surprise audit and to tell him that he had already made the deposit if he came asking for it. The details were worked out, and over the next hour of conversation, and I did my homework on the kitchen table before we all went to bed for the night. 2 days later, the security team showed up. There were two types of people who compromised the team. Two small bookkeepers with glasses who performed the actual audit, and 8 large men who looked like they ate nails.
They looked like Pinkerton men. They were huge.
Yeah. They could have been starting linebackers for the NFL. Despite their intimidating appearance, they were very neatly groomed and very professional in their demeanor. They arrived before the store opened, and it was clear to me that somebody was in trouble. Do you think?
Yeah.
I saw Gene wearing a pair of dark sunglasses that concealed his eyes as he returned from my dad's pharmacy with a desperate look on his face. This was the first time I'd ever seen him in sunglasses. I caught a glimpse of his red, puffy eyes as he appeared to wipe a tear from the right corner just above his eye, just above his cheek. Right corner of his eye, just above his cheek. The team took over the store and roped off the staircase that led to the managing employees' offices. Gene was the first one they met with, and he didn't have a chance to discuss anything with the other managers before they whisked him upstairs for interrogation. Throughout the remainder of the day, each department manager got a turn, one at a time. I made a few trips to the snack bar. Well, you were enjoying the show, that's why. Snack bar that was on the floor beneath that office. I heard a lot of banging around, a lot of exchanges, but I couldn't quite make out specific words. Sometimes later, Mr. Tippett, the department manager over carpeting and other home goods, came out of the office and looked like he had been roughed up. His shirt was torn, the top of
it was
missing. Really?
Yeah.
His tie was gone. His arms were red. I could see a bruise mark near his collarbone. I must have been staring at him as he descended the staircase. He rather sarcastically and threateningly told me, "Just wait till you get up there. You're going to wind up dead if you say anything." I was scared. I wanted to call my dad, but I couldn't leave. My turn to ascend the staircase finally came, and I unwillingly made my way to the main office, not knowing what was going to happen and wondering if they were going to beat me up too. As I came into the office, the head of the security told me to sit down and ask me if I wanted a soda. I was very relaxed and calm. I could tell that he was trying to make me feel comfortable. Then he explained to me that I'd be sitting there for several hours and that I didn't need to give him any information, as my dad had already told him about me. I was relieved. I figured that the man my father spoke with on the phone, he was wearing a nice suit and tie. He spoke to me about normal everyday things that had nothing to do with the store. We talked about my schooling, hobbies, interests, and he even asked if I was a good bowler. Before I left, he cautioned me not to talk with any of the other managers, and that if anyone should ask me about what happened to me, that I was to simply reply, "I can't talk about it." As I left the office and made my way down the stairs, I was passed by another department head. We didn't say anything to each other. I went back to helping customers and finished the normal day's operation before finally going home at the end of my shift. When I arrived home, I was surprised that my dad was already home. He was telling my mother, "Call the movers, we're moving back to Chicago." He further explained that he would be managing the largest Super X pharmacy in the chain and that it was under construction at Ford City in Chicago. At the time, Ford City was advertised on TV as, quote, the largest shopping center in the U.S. under one roof. Adding to their surprise, he said that he would be getting a large reward and that all our expenses would be paid by Kroger. Gene Barr fled the state to Owensboro, Kentucky.
Owensboro, Kentucky.
But he was arrested and later charged with grand larceny and embezzlement. Authorities caught up with the other department managers on the take, and they were arrested. That group included Mr. Tippett, the first in what has become a long line of men who threatened my life. Who was Mr. Tippett again?
He was another store. He was a manager in the store, but he threatened me. He told me, he said, "You better keep your mouth shut."
Yeah, that's right. He's the one that, okay, gotcha. Okay. It wasn't long before we packed up and moved to Cicero, Illinois. My dad took over managing the pharmacy at Ford City and bought himself a brand new Oldsmobile loaded with all the options. Those options included electric windows, air conditioning, power steering, things we had never seen as a family. My dad later commented to me while driving the car, "None of this would have ever happened if it weren't for you, Redhead." He smiled and seemed very proud of our accomplishment. I didn't think much about it as as I was now focused on my new school and life in Cicero. After all, living in Cicero was a bit of a culture shock for me as I got used to the Italian-run neighborhood. Little did I know that I would later be consorting with organized crime figures. My associations in that area would help me understand how things really worked in Chicago. So, timeline: 1964, Moline, Illinois, and my first undercover job. Early summer of 1968, discharged from the Marine Corps and went to Curtis Hansen's Y.A.K for work, the Y.A.K.
Young Adults Club.
Young Adult Club?
That Y.A.K stands for Young Adults Club.
Oh, but spelled club with a K instead of a C.
Yeah, that's the way he spelled it.
Okay. All right. Early fall 1968, met Ken Hansen and left employ of Curtis. 69, tending bar at B Girls. Eye-opening experiences on the outfit operations and police shakedowns. Worked with Kurt. Met Jimmy Coutura. Transporter trip to Las Vegas. Spent time with the Hansen brothers making arrangements for my opening of my bookstore. Bought a 6 flat on Carmen. 1970s, became acquainted with the Chicago horse mafia activities. George Jane murder. 71, contacted the F.B.I. and met with them for the first time. Went to American Bonding with Kurt. Met Joey Lombardo, Tony Spilotro, Irv Weiner, Frank Schweiss, Pat Ricciardi. Ricciardi. Yep. Joey Cosentino.
Joey Cosentino. He owned the building.
And other made guys. 72, 3, driving around and doing Hansen errands. 73, Northwest Memorial visit panic attacks. 74, met Caifano, Johnny Rogers, other building, and many other, while building construction of the store. Bought house in Richmond and sold 6 flat. August 30th, Labor Day opening weekend for store. Tony Spilotro goes to Vegas with his own crew to take over. There was mine as Kurt told me to leave me alone. The store was mine as Kurt told me to leave. Kurt is told to leave me alone.
The store was mine as Kurt told me. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Met Jimmy Cozzo, Phil Amato, Dick Hoyt, Larry, and Joey Petit.
Right.
Vince Solano, Louis Ebele, and others. 74 to 76, ran the store, created Rush, bought out Barry from the bar. Bob Hugel went on to witness protection. I met with Hank Schmidt, F.B.I. second handler. October 75, liquor licenses expired. 76, grandstand and premier off-track betting parlors. JL becomes street boss. Paul Gonsky murder. 77. This is all what we're going to hear about in the book, right?
Yes.
Okay. So let's start it all, how it all
That's
started.
pretty much in order.
It's in order, right? All right. How it all started. Back in 1968, when I was discharged from the Marine Corps, I made an effort to reach out to my uncle, Roy Wemette, my father's brother. As a kid, I was forbidden to talk to him, and I always wondered why. He was a taxi driver that worked the streets in the city of Chicago and was a full-blown, hardcore alcoholic. When I found him, he was living with a woman named Marion McGann, who was a good-looking, very nice woman. I often wondered what she saw in him. She lived at 5056 North Claremont in Chicago's northwest side, which is where we met. After a few hours of chat and get to know you with Marion, she asked me where I was going back to work. I told her I didn't have a job just yet. She picked up the phone and she called her brother, Curtis Hansen. Collect. She called him Collect.
Person to person.
She did what was then known as person-to-person calling, telling the operator the call was to Marion. That way, Kurt would know that who the call was from, and he would decline to accept the charges, so the operator would end it. He would then immediately call her back, and as he had an unlimited distance call pack, he kept Marion from having to pay for the call. This was her way of contacting Kurt. While waiting for Kurt's return call to come through, she said, You have a job now. You can drive me and your uncle out to your brother's place in Frankfurt. Her
My
phone
brother's place.
to my brother's place in Frankfurt, Illinois. Her phone rang. She picked it up and spoke to Kurt with some small basic talk before she said, By the way, I'm coming out for the weekend and you're giving Roy's nephew a job. Marion very casually and matter of factly orchestrated our futures, all while she delicately puffed on a cigarette. I could tell that she was a force to be reckoned with.
She
And I
was.
had my She was, huh? She was a real
Diane mentioned her. That was her sister-in-law, Diane.
got it. It wasn't long before we were loaded in my black 62 four-door Chevy Bel Air that my mother had given me and headed out to the Valley View Y.A.K. The Y.A.K stood for Young Adults Club. On the drive there, Marion told me about her brother. He was a World War II hero and had served our country in the Marine Corps. He was twice decorated with the Silver Star at the Battle of Iwo Jima and had a host of other decorations that distinguished him as a real standout guy for the Corps. He was also a bail bondsman who had a lot of connections with the police in Chicago itself and some of its suburbs. Uncle Roy told me, as we stopped for gas, to get him a pack of Lucky Strikes. This is one guy you don't fool around with. He kills people. I replied, Now, what do you mean by that? Uncle Roy continued, Just don't fool around with him, because he's mobbed up and he's killed a few people for them. I knew his tone and his words were grave, and I gave some real consideration to them as we continued the trip. We got back in my car and headed out for the open road for the Y.A.K. It was about 2.5 hour drive from Marion's house on the north side of Chicago to Kurt's place on U.S. Highway 30, the Lincoln Highway in Will County, onto what the natives called the South Side. The club was about a mile past Frankfurt, Illinois. I came to learn for myself that Marion's brother, Curtis Hanson, was in very fact sometimes a hitman that worked for Jimmy the Bomber Couture. Kurt had a 99-year lease on a 40-acre piece of land from Marshall Savings and Loan, an outfit-controlled savings and loan that would eventually went bust. His lease rate only cost $100 a year. He acquired the lease one New Year's Eve when the director held late-night meetings to discuss and make plans to deal with some bad loans that they were trying to collect or write off. They were not overly concerned as their institution was federally insured, and naturally they offered Kurt the lease with the hopes of bringing in some real cash from his operation, rather than from the terms of payment set within the lease. Kurt also acquired an 8 24-unit apartment building. He acquired 8 24-unit apartment buildings in Chicago Heights. For over 5 years, he collected rent and never paid a dime on the mortgage before it was seized for non-payment. He had plenty of opportunities in life, but his I don't care attitude let them fall to the wayside. Really?
Yeah.
All the apartments?
He just had an I don't care attitude about things.
The Y.A.K property included a luxurious 6-bedroom brick house, an extremely large swimming pool, a band shell out in the Grove area, a motel that had a converted barn for residents, and an actual barn with several horses for paying guests to ride at their leisure. The large converted barn was a place for general entertainment, but was particularly staged for the teenage crowds. We called it the Juice Club because Kurt couldn't get a liquor license, and that was his next best alternative. It had a tiered seating arrangement made out of plywood covered in blue shag carpet. Kurt's original idea was to have a nightclub there, but you just can't have a real nightclub without the ability to offer alcoholic beverages. The house was going to be a roadhouse, aka brothel, with several prostitutes there. But Kurt's plans changed all that when he took over the property. He got a county license and a state license, only to discover that the feds had their eye on him, so he couldn't procure any kind of federal liquor license. Despite his best efforts, he was under too much scrutiny to engage in the illicit but profitable activities that he and his cohorts wanted, so he had to settle on the next best option out there in Frankfort, Illinois. First impressions. When we finally arrived, I met Kurt for the first time. He was a fat man who seemed to be very jolly. He hugged his sister and said hello to me as his sister asked him, "What room will Billy be sleeping in?" So he can bring in his bags. He asked Dougie, a good-looking 19-year-old kid that served as a pool lifeguard, to show me to my room. After I put my duffel bag and clothes away, I joined the rest of the family. Go on in and take a look at the kitchen, and while you're at it, bring me a cup of coffee back. Kurt told me, bring me back a cup of coffee. As I reviewed the Y.A.K's commercial kitchen, I was simply overwhelmed. I had seen mess halls in the Marine Corps, but nothing like this. It was complete with walk-in freezer, stocked with an array of premium quality steaks, chops, briskets, roast fillets, and every other choice you could imagine. He had concession fare too: hot dogs, Italian sausage, Polish sausage. Case after case of hamburger patties, boxes and boxes of French fries, and every other popular menu item at fairs or carnivals. The walk-in cooler was for milk, butter, and other assorted foods. There was a pantry full of condiments, non-perishables, and serving items for the concession stands. There was also an overabundance of breakfast foods, cases of eggs, boxes of ham slices, shrink-wrapped cases of bacon, and bread for every type of meal you could need. He had a Hobart 18-gallon mixer for large dough recipes, huge commercial ovens with stackable baking racks, and a grill that was 3 feet deep, 8 feet wide, with huge ventilators to help keep smoke out of the air when things got really busy or when several deep fat fryers got hot and greasy. I was very impressed, as there were thousands of dollars of food that could literally feed hundreds of people, all at a moment's notice. It was a legitimate professional kitchen. Kurt had told me to look around, and I was really taken in with what I saw. He then told me to make anything I wanted to eat, to cook for anyone else there who wanted food, treating me as his employee right from the go. I went to go get his cup of coffee that flowed from a spigot at the base of an industrial-sized coffee urn. I asked him how he wanted it, and he told me black. He hollered over his shoulder while he sat at a table with a 5 phone line system on it that doubled as his work desk. We ate our fill and then stayed up late talking, while Kurt just sat at the table and said goodnight. As each of the rest of us went to bed. It seems that Kurt never slept. The next day, I woke to Dougie telling me to put my swim trunks on and join everybody at the pool. After a brief swim, Marion asked me to make some breakfast for her and my Uncle Roy. I asked Kurt if he wanted something. He told me not right now. I was hungry as I cooked eggs, bacon, and toast for them and myself. I was terribly curious how such a fat man like Kurt didn't want something to eat. I would later find out he was taking
phenobarbital.
That kept him up most nights and days, all in an attempt to lose some of his extra weight. Wow. After bringing the dishes back into the kitchen, I went out to the enormous pool, and I noticed a sign that said members only on the gate as you entered the fenced pool. As I passed it, I saw Marion with her long chestnut hair sunning herself in a lounge chair in a designer swimsuit. My uncle was sitting next to her, fully clothed and taking in the sights. Her brother Kurt was walking around waist deep in the water at the shallow end of the pool with a cigarette on the very tips of his fingers. There were several other young people in the pool, and they were either swimming or diving off one of the 3 multi-level diving boards. Jeez, 3?
Yeah, that place was big.
As I looked at Kurt, it made me chuckle. He was covered in hair. Hair follicles seemed to cover every exposed inch of his body. It was a black, thick, curly hair that made it hard to see his dark olive oil skin. He featured a rough, unshaven face and a mop of long, wavy locks on his head that matched the rest of him. His belly was so fat that it hung over his swim trunks. Speaking of his trunks, they were filled with air and floating around him, owning the fact that it took a lot of swimsuit material to cover a man with such prodigious girth. He was 5'8" in his late 40s, weighed well over 300 pounds, and was walking very slowly in the water with a big toothy grin on his face as he tried to keep his balance with a cup of coffee in his other hand.
A cigarette in one hand, a cup of coffee in the other.
He usually didn't go out for his swim, but Marion had challenged him about the fact that he owned a pool but never got in it himself. In response, he decided to suit up, enter the water, and was now a real spectacle for each of us to behold. I was an avid swimmer, and I dove into the water on that blistering hot summer day. Later on, Dougie tossed me a towel as I got out of the water to dry off. I was 6'1", 155, with a baby face that made me look about 5 years younger than I actually was. I had a bright red curly hair, blue eyes, pasty white pale skin that burned very easily if I got too much exposure to the sun. I dried off my beanpole of a body and got dressed. My Uncle Roy and Marion later returned to the city, borrowing one of Kurt's 3 Cadillacs, and left me at my new employer's establishment. Okay, my new job and the setup. I stayed at the club for a few months doing odd jobs, working for room and board at about $25 per week. I regularly served coffee to Kurt and his friends, cooked meals for anyone he asked me to cater, cared for his horses, and basically did any job that needed doing. I saw many famous national performers play at the Y.A.K Club, and meeting them was a big deal for me at the time. The bands and the performers who played there are simply too numerous to list by name. Because of his outfit connections, Kurt always got the most popular groups to play at the Y.A.K, and they did so at a loss. That was just a necessary stop if they wanted to work at any of the mob affiliated places like Las Vegas that raked in the big tour money. So they typically did their best to make the most of it. I met Kurt, what bands?
Poco Harem. I think I have a list of some. Buddy Rich played there. If they were going down to Rush Street or something like that, they had to play there first.
Okay.
But I think I list a couple. I know Poco Harem, I remember a lot. If they were going to the Kinetic Playground or someplace, he'd
right
there.
I met Kurt's wife, Sally, around the first weekend of my stay. She was a tall, slim, and very beautiful young lady of about 22, with blonde hair and a body to die for. She was always well dressed and wore a lot of elaborately coordinated outfits. I wondered what she could possibly see in Kurt other than their shared racehorse, Dancer's Beauty.
Yes.
That horse was a champion pacer, sulky stallion that won a lot of money for both of them at the Aurora Downs. Sally wasn't around the Y.A.K that much, but when she was there, she collected the admission money at the door, particularly when the big-name bands were playing. I also remember that she had made several trips to Las Vegas with her sister-in-law, Beverly Hanson. When she was very nice to me and very classy. They were certainly an odd couple, and it was obvious she was not into Kurt for his looks or winning personality. So the only thing left was his money. At least that's the only thing I could think of. A lot of other people came out to see Kurt, and they had a lot of associates. They typically paid him visits on weeknights when concerts were not taking place. I didn't know many of them, but I did see one guy who made frequent appearances. He was a short, balding man who tried to keep a hat to try to cover up his receding hairline and a few missing teeth. I met him once in the parking lot, and he told me he was there to see his brother. He introduced himself to me as Kenny and made small talk, asking me a lot of questions before he went to play gin rummy with Kurt. Little did I know that this shorter, slimmer man was often there to participate in talks about ways to murder and dispose of George Jane, a refined horseman from Park Ridge on the north side who owned Happy Days stables and was considered a bitter rival by his own brother, Silas Jane. One day in the afternoon, Kenny showed up and asked me to drive him home to his stables. Someone had dropped him off there, and he'd only been at the Y.A.K for about 20 minutes, and it all seemed a bit odd, almost orchestrated to me. I drove him back to his place. We had the windows down in my car because it was a nice warm summer day. He asked me many questions and had a strange twinkle in his eye as he pointed to the landmarks along the way to his properties. I was not familiar with the area at all, but I was curious as he carefully worded his directions. He kept telling me, you go this way here to get to my place. Now don't forget. As I drove him to 17201 South Central Tinley Park, Illinois, directly attached to the Cook County Forest Preserves. And there's a picture of Sky High Stables in the book. At the back of Kenny's long dirt driveway, I could see a very large building with Sky High Stables written on it in bold red letters. I drove to the end of the dirt road and into the gravel parking lot near a blue mobile home to the right of the barn. I parked in front of it as instructed by Kenny. He asked me if I wanted him to show me his place, and he asked me if I liked horses. As he opened the door of the car to get out, we were instantly surrounded by 20 to 30 Doberman pinschers, barking and running around my car. I was afraid of all the dogs. Kurt had one like them, but dealing with this pack was nothing like facing a lone dog. I was quite overwhelmed. Kenny kept laughing at my fear of his dogs, telling me they wouldn't hurt me unless he put them up to it. After a while, I got out of my car. Sat in the car for a bit.
Yeah, I was hesitant to get out.
And stood next to me, and sure enough, there were no issues with the dopes. Kenny took me on a tour of his stables, starting at the south barn where he kept his show horses in his 12 by 12 foot box stalls with a cement aisle. He showed me the club room, a 10-foot wide fireplace with flagstone mantel, a kitchen, washroom with shower, and several other rooms where saddles and other fine leather bridles were kept. There were 3 or 4 rooms with beds in them for stable hands that also featured an office. From this room, you could see 50 by 100 foot. From this room, you could
arena.
A 50 by 100 foot indoor riding arena with a large plexiglass window and wooden bleachers for people to use while watching the horse shows from the inside from inside the club room. He next directed me to an area in the north barn with a few box stalls in front, stand stalls in the back, and the feed room for easy access. As we walked to the back of that area, he opened a sliding door to show me a large mound of dirt that ran across the entire back of the building. The mound was about 10 feet high, and I later learned that it was used as a backdrop for target practice. I was impressed through the tour of his facilities. He really had a fine place with some great design details, and I could tell that he had put a lot of thought into its layout. Now used to the many dogs that were running around us, I returned to the car. Kenny bid me goodbye, asking if I knew my way back and telling me to come back whenever I wanted. I headed to Kurt's place, thinking I would never return to Kenny's stables. Since Kurt was not around, I just did a few things that needed to be done and then finished some chores before calling it a day and going to bed. And what do you think? Was it a good time to stop?
I think so. Thank you, Adam. You've done a fine job.
So I'm going to put the marker in the book, and then next week we'll pick up from there. But we got through the first 3 chapters anyway.
I didn't expect you to get that far.
Yeah, well, my eyes are starting to get a little wonky, and I have to get to work. Did you guys enjoy that? I mean, it's Adam, I missed this.
They've been talking back and
Start
forth.
over, please. Yeah, that's very, very funny, Robert. Back the video up. Anyway, so Red, it's been a great time, and I think that we're going to. I think that we'll do this next week. Did you guys like it?
Okay, thank you, Adam. Thank you very much.
What did they put in the comments?
They're talking to each other about DPN, about pills, diet pills, things like that.
So they just enjoyed listening along, I guess, because
evidently they did.
Michael Graham loved it. Scott H, good job. Okay, all right. You guys like it?
I don't see anybody here that really had any questions.
Really good. I'm glad you guys liked it. I think it's a good idea, and Red, people are still going to buy your book. So, Julia, I enjoyed this.
Thank you, you, folks. I looked, and there's 2 new reviews on Amazon, and one of the reviews, very interesting, like others. It was an autograph book that I sent out to them, but they still wrote the review on Amazon. They took a picture of my autograph and put it on it. Very nice. Thank you, folks.
All right. Have a great day, Red.
Thank you, Adam. God bless you. God bless everybody else too.
And I'll take you out. Everybody have a great day.
The combination of the videotapes and Wemette's testimony resulted in the conviction of 2 men on extortion charges. One of them was Frank Schweiz, known in syndicate circles as the German, a feared mob terrorist and a suspect in a number of gangland murders.
He was described to me by other outfit individuals as the most feared hitman. And as he said to me, my reputation precedes me, son.